So I'm going to redo this video from last night because I want to revise it since I did have a new revelation awakening even this morning. And so, all information does build on itself. And so there has to be a way to characterize the information without coming off biased. And so even last night I came off biased when I was talking about Schrodinger's cat and then all the different antibiotics, of which people must understand why antibiotics exist, that the reason why people take antibiotics because they are suffering. And why are people suffering? Because they keep taking antibiotics. And so it becomes a constant loop and it becomes an addiction and it also destroys people. And so what is Schrodinger's cat? No one knows if any scientific theory is right or wrong until said theory can be tested and proved. So when a cat is put into a box with a radioactive isotope in it, a small one, okay, and you seal the box, the cat went into it alive, so assume it's alive, or someone will assume it's dead because there's something radioactive in it. So the cat is alive or dead until you open up the box and see if the cat survives that radioactive isotope that's in it. And so the proof that the radioactive isotope isn't deadly is if the cat is dead or alive. Now, if the cat had a certain amount of life in it and that radioactive isotope then took away components of their life, how would you measure that? What would that look like? Will the cat have some kind of different genetic expression? Will the cat have some kind of genetic expression? Yes. Did it mean that the cat is dead or have some components die? No, it mutated. And so then at what point does any theory around what causes death and what causes life, at what point can you prove that correlation equals causation as far as life and death? And this is where the Julie Juice meta mentality is going to come into play and prove proof of life. So proof of life is genetic expression, genetic expressions. Okay? Which means that if someone's in pain or someone has reactions in their body, things come to surface. Well, you have to allow the genetic expression to express itself and not suppress the energy with antibiotics, oncology, or drugs, or even aggressive herbs. So those that come into this world at a deficit, and when you come in this world at a deficit and you're being hit by so many different viruses that have several types of programming, well, the viruses are going to try to edify the person. They're going to try to bring that person up to the level of the environment because all those viruses that people are exposed to have the gift of sight, have the gift of hearing. But it's painful. Okay? It's painful. And so when someone who comes into this world at a deficit now is mixing in with people with programming where they have the things that people are lacking, and they feel the genetic expression, what do? The first thing they do, they go and try to suppress it with an antibiotic or with some type of surgery or whatever else is in the medical holistic system. So when you are experiencing genetic expression, you must feed the body and bring in elements that will allow the genetic expression, and all food and all diverse and water must be ingested without discrimination, without fear. And so then when someone's suffering because they are now trying to be edified, like the microbiome is trying to edify itself based upon the viral exposure. And so ending someone's suffering is only meant for a doctor. See, that's the thing with ending suffering, because when someone says, oh, we're going to end your suffering, and they do euthanasia, that's ending someone's suffering in a very aggressive way, which means you're ending someone's life when you're trying to end somebody's suffering. But people take that term, ending somebody's suffering, and they apply it to then a person's genetic expression. Because you can have a whole bunch of suffering at the end of a person's life when most of their body is now at a deficit trying to be edified to a certain point. And there's so much suffering that the only thing left is hospice and or euthanasia relative to the quality of life, and if the family and the person has already written it in their living will. But ending someone's suffering preemptively by recommending a therapy before the suffering even happens, that is still meant for a doctor. Your personal doctor, not even a doctor out there in the media, not even someone who holds a license out there, not even a lay professional or a professional, or a layman or a professional or whatever. And so ending someone's suffering is only meant for a doctor, and telling someone to do or not do something to preemptively end someone's suffering is still meant for a doctor. But we know professionals and the lay people and even the media are taking upon themselves to preemptively end someone's suffering when they can't guarantee they will not suffer. So when you tell someone not to do something, and you're out there on Facebook and you're putting out there, don't do this, or someone says, oh, please do this, what's your intention? It's not to save them, because you're not saving them. You're trying to end their suffering before they even know that they're suffering. And you already know what's going on inside of them. And so when you recommend a therapy or do not recommend a therapy, you're trying to end someone's suffering that hasn't even materialized. Or if it's materialized, you really think that therapy or not doing a therapy is going to end their suffering? No, they're already suffering. People are already at a deficit. And it's going to be up to them to bring themselves up to this environment to then exhibit proof of life. It's called genetic expression. But people do, what they do is they take cures, they take antibiotics, they take remedies, they take so many different things to end their suffering, and then they wonder why they still suffer. That cure, the antibiotic, that whatever they did, the operation, still wasn't enough, because they're still suffering in other ways. They're on a string of medications that are blocking the genetic expression, because they're not allowing their body to express, because that's why they're on the medications, because the body wants to express, and the medications are stopping the body's genetic expression. So that's why it's illegal to end somebody else's suffering in the Cure's medical holistic system, because that is solely reserved for their personal doctor, who will have to take their license and put it on the line and then practice medicine. That's why they call it practicing medicine. Activists assume suffering because they are suffering themselves. So they're constantly on the defense and constantly on the attack for somebody else, not even for themselves. Because no one's coming into their home and saying, okay, you have to do this, and forcing anything onto them. Yeah, maybe some professions are saying, well, if you want to belong to this profession or not belong to this profession, you have to do this, this, and that. And that's still a choice. We all have choices of where we work, what industry we belong to. And so no one's forcing anyone to do or not do something. But this fear of potential suffering and then telling someone to do something or not do something to end their suffering is no different than what a doctor actually does in a doctor's office, ending someone's suffering. And it could be the most extreme, called euthanasia. That's why we're in such a chaotic type of situation, because of all the activism that we were allowed through free speech. Okay? Yeah, go ahead. Say whatever you want, because that's how the system is using your fears to figure out how you will choose your own adventure, and then you can't blame someone else. Even though you are blaming someone else, you really can't blame anyone, because no one's forced you to do anything. You have been given all the choices and you've been given all the information, and you still will do or not do something and still pass away. Okay? And so activists assume suffering because they are suffering themselves. They have no idea how to end their own suffering. And so they project what they think is preemptively ending the suffering onto the population without properly analyzing the whole situation, the arguments, what they're taking on. The media also projects their perception of how to preemptively end someone's suffering. And so they are not innocent in any of this as well, even if they hold a title or a license. So I don't care if there's a licensed doctor like Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Oh, you should do this, you should do that. All the doctors, they parade on CNN, Fox, and even the doctors on YouTube with all the stuff about the cytokine storms and then blaming this, and that. They don't know that if you do or do not something, it's going to end your suffering. They're just speculating theoretically. There's no proof. There is no proof that any therapy, doing something or not doing something, is going to end someone's suffering, because that's the reason why you're promoting your side of the argument, is because you think you're going to save someone from suffering when you can't guarantee that. So no one should be telling people to preemptively end their own suffering. And so this is why you must understand, in order to live indefinitely, you have to deal with a certain amount of suffering that you have run away from for years and you didn't know it. And then you also have to deal with your friends and family suffering they have projected through their own mucus and still power through. That's the whole point of the JJ Meta mentality, is that you're going to have to suffer for a certain amount of time, and then you have to keep feeding that energy, allowing the genetic expression to happen. And if you don't, and you keep using cures, even using J juice to stop it, then you are just going to delay the inevitable, because eventually it has to come out somehow. And it usually comes out in people's politics, religion, and scientific dogmas, in their skin, in their hair, skin and nails, in their 11 different systems with the weaknesses. And so this is something that people don't understand about suffering. You cannot tell someone to preemptively end their suffering. Just like you can't have a person go through private message and say, oh yeah, I support you harming yourself, like that girl that was telling that guy to commit suicide. That was a no-no. She was basically telling him to end his suffering. But she did it in a very direct way through manipulation. But we do it through the medical system. Oh yeah, here, preemptively end your suffering. Take this therapy or don't take a therapy. And that's both sides of the coin of the arguments around the V world. Is everyone is out there promoting preemptively ending someone's suffering, which is basically saying, at the most aggressive level, what a doctor would do with euthanasia. And so you may have to change your lifestyle and belief systems so their suffering isn't cannibalizing you. So when you're around your friends and family who are suffering and they're projecting their suffering onto you, how much of their suffering is going to then bleed onto you, and how much are you going to take that on and then also adopt it and assimilate with their suffering? And then you're all suffering together. Misery loves company, right? And so that this is where then you have to realize that you got to make sure that their suffering isn't cannibalizing you while you're trying to take 10 steps forward, even though being around them is causing you to take 5 steps back. You literally have to deal with your own shit, literally. And that's what's lost in the population. They don't realize that everything that they're doing to save people, to preemptively end people's suffering, is really speaking from their own world, because they have so much suffering within. And so the whole Schrodinger's cat is that you have to prove that no one knows any scientific theory is right or wrong until said theory can be tested and proved. And so, if you want to live, you have to allow genetic expression. If you don't want to live indefinitely, then you will find ways to suppress genetic expression. And that also means how you program your lymphatic system to block information. And people block information for various reasons. I put blocks on people who are aggressive, attacking me. I have blocks all over the place. And I have my own personal protection. And the FBI, the CIA, Interpol, my own police department, and I know my personal FBI agents out here, they also know exactly what I'm up against. And they know who I am. So I have my own blockages to people's information that I don't want them to cannibalize me. But some people block information that could actually help them. But you can't legislate that morals on someone that they should be taking on all the viruses, because they have so much of the predispositions causing an aggressive amount of genetic expression that maybe certain things could help alleviate But like anything, if their intention is to block genetic expression, then they're going to be not only doing whatever therapies you're recommending preemptively do that, but they'll also be taking their own direct antibiotics in reaction to the body trying to express itself. And that, again, is not something for any lay person to go and recommend to someone how to use a cure against any symptom. Again, you have to see your own doctor who will take it on their license that they are going to recommend whatever. And if you have major adverse reactions for whatever reason, then it's up to them to figure out how to end your suffering. And if it means that euthanasia is the answer according to a doctor, you've already signed up for that already when you're in the cures market, seeing your doctor. You've already seen the order of operations. And so this is how I'm going to prove that my claims, if you actually allow your body to express whatever's out there, whatever information you're exposed to, even with the antibiotic qualities that are in it, even with the programming that you may not agree with. I don't agree with all the religions out there or the scientific dogmas or all the politics. Does it mean that I go and try to destroy them and eradicate them? No, I take on some information and I leave the rest. I assimilate. And so genetic expression means that whatever it is that's out there, that's in a package deal, because these viruses and people's mucuses have a package. It's a package deal. Your body has to go and assimilate to it and figure out, take what it needs, and then disperse the rest through your first and second lines of defense. But if you're trying to block all the information, then your T cells and B cells will then always constantly be activating, and it's not going to be released, because if it's released in a way that you need to stay alive indefinitely, you'll feel the pain. Because the body will be allowed to express itself by the release process. Try telling someone that who is way at a deficit. So that's why it's difficult to, that's why it's been difficult to even articulate this, because everyone's at different levels of their genetic expression and how much can they handle and how much do they want to handle. And if they don't want to handle it all and they want to be cured, but they're okay with the progressive and the accelerated decline, who am I to go and tell them that they shouldn't do that? And so that's why we cannot be recommending to people how to end their suffering, preemptively or otherwise, unless you are their personal doctor who knows their whole history. And even then, that's not enough. And people still end up, of course, they end up passed away, because that's the nature of the medical system. Eventually, you end up in palliative care. How long will you be from the nursery all the way to palliative care and hospice? That all depends on predispositions and the advancements of the medical system, and then what you're willing to do to deal with the things that you've done in the past that you can always redirect. Anybody can redirect what they did in the past if they're still alive and they can handle the genetic expression. Not everybody can, so you really can't legislate morals and tell them they can't do something or should do something. And so we're in a total chaotic cesspool of just everyone trying to save each other and be a protector, when in actuality it's causing the destruction of their friends and family. But you can't tell them that either, because they're suffering. And they know they're suffering inside, and how do they project it? Through the activism. They attack their politicians, they attack people who believe differently, they attack any new information, or they completely block it. Which, I get it. If you're not ready to hear this information, then you shouldn't follow me and you should block me and not communicate with me. But people are in a war with themselves where they don't like my information, but they cannot help but just try to contact me. And I get it. They're in a war with themselves and they have to express in the way that's best for you, that's not going to get in the way of my life, and I don't care. Do what you want to do. But Schrodinger's cat is very interesting. I like that, because even though someone will characterize genetic expression as something deadly, it doesn't mean that it is. It's just someone who is way at the other end of the spectrum, where they have so much retroactive genetic expression that they don't want to feel it. They know they have so much because of all the drugs they've done, all the different therapies they've done. They have so many different diseases and cancers and things that are going on inside of them, and they're under so many therapies that if they were to say, okay, I'm going to walk away from the therapies market and allow everything to express, it would be suffering. And how much do they want to suffer? It'll get in the way of their life. And their life is about being cured. And so if they can go on a progressive and then accelerated decline relative to their expectation and their understanding of the environment, that's their choice. But everyone should have a choice in the matter. Everyone should understand everything about genetic expression. And so the DNA methylation is about suppressing genetic expression. It's used in the oncology market. It's used in all the different therapies market. And so elements can be used for promoting life, and elements can be used to suppress life. And life also has to be regulated, but does it have to be regulated by antibiotics and or producing T cells and B cells to attack the life? Or can you use different elements like electrolytes and salt and water and all that stuff, and in a balanced way where it doesn't become a cure and trap the little beasts inside of you that are commandeering your immune system in different ways? And then you can regulate the life and then also allow the body to release the things that are causing the hormonal imbalances. Then you have to understand your own sphincter. You have to understand blowing your nose. You have to understand feeding your body, not discriminate against, meat, milk, cheese, eggs, and fruits and vegetables and gluten and all that stuff, which is huge in the organic world. They have now relegated themselves to like eating celery. And they're all on their gluten-free diets and their meat-free diets and their vegan diets and all the different diets that are out there, that they're losing intelligence because they're not bringing the intelligence in. And then with all of their therapies and their antibiotics and all their detoxes and their remedies and the pills, powder supplements and whatever, and then all the cures that they're taking is entrapping their ignorance within their body. They're not taking on intelligence, and or they are destroying their intelligence because they're on the diets and everything else. And that's why you're seeing people looping and saying the same thing. And I see it in my Jilly Juice world. Oh, I see it all over the place. I'm not going to call them out on it because none of my business. They understand. They see my information. They're choosing to ignore this information. They're choosing to live their life the way they want to live within their sphere of influence, within what they can handle. And it's not up to me to get mad at them. I have before gotten very mad at people that didn't understand or want to evolve with me. But then if I'm getting mad at people, that means that I'm getting triggered, and then you have to release the triggers. You let them live their life and don't torture them with trying to impose your aggressive way of evolving, because that's not where they're at. Can I still be friends with them? What is friendships? What are friendships? Why are people connected? That's what you have to realize too, is why people hang out together. What kind of symbiotic relationship do you have with a person? Sometimes it's based upon just your politics, your religion, and your scientific dogmas. And when those change, the relationship changes. Maybe there isn't a relationship anymore because you're not. And even then, if you are physically here, like you're in my world, and we don't have a lot in common, except for certain things that may be like a conduit between myself and the other person. Then your friends and your family are there to support you in something that you need support in. But if you don't need support from your friends and family, and really they're more of a drain than they are an addition, because they're not adding anything, because are they autonomous? If they need you all the time, then you're their savior, you're their protector who actually is destroying them, and vice versa. If you need them all the time, you're sucking the life out of your friends and family. And so then you have to redefine your relationships. What are they based upon? So you don't feel lonely? So you have a shared experience of hobbies? Okay, I get that. What's my hobby? I am increasing my intellect, and there are people on my Facebook who also help me increase my intellect, and I'm helping them increase their intellect. And it's a quid pro quo, but it's through the virtual world. Do I have any major hobbies out there? Not necessarily, because right now I'm focusing on the brain. If I wanted to go and play racquetball and go and run marathons, which I'm not going to torture my body to do that, then I'd have those kind of friends out there that are willing to misery loves the company. Okay? And so that's then you start redefining everything in your life. And that's hard for people, is to redefine everything they've ever known. Okay, so proof of life is genetic expressions. And if you're afraid to allow your genes to express because you think it's deadly, who told you it was deadly? Oh, because someone died because they had some kind of genetic expression that was diagnosed by a doctor and they didn't do anything about it, and so they let it express and it cannibalized them? Well, you can imagine probably they're starving. They don't have enough salt in their diet. They're on the diets. There's so many predispositions that people have. And so in your perception that when you allow your genes to express, it means that you're going to die pretty soon or whatever, they're not realizing that you must feed your body. You probably need to add in more electrolytes that's missing because people are so afraid of salt and water and everything else. And so you don't have to die from genetic expression, but that's the perception. And how do you change people's perceptions? I don't want to see that rash on my body. Whatever. The rash I had right back here that I showed on Facebook, I don't even feel it. I just saw it. I don't even feel it. But a couple months ago, I had major hives all over my front, and it was itchy. I had hives on the back of my arms and my shoulders. I was itching everywhere and all this other stuff. I'm not itching anymore now. They just kind of come up for whatever reason because there's still residual left. But they're not aggressive. They're not. See, when you see really red color, like when you go to the images on Facebook about rashes, and they're extremely red, purple, brown, like red, that's an aggressive infection. That's energy. That's what people are afraid of, is that aggressive energy. But at some point, you have to let it express itself. And you have to keep feeding the energy, not trying to cure it or stop it or push it back into the body. Okay? And so when you have earwax and it's like all brown, that's a lot of energy. That's infection. When your earwax is kind of yellowish and orange, that's a little infection. That's the body dealing with some energy. If it's just like white flaky stuff, like I get white flaky stuff, I don't even get that much of it. That's just the body, it's its own protection against anything that comes in. But when it turns the colors, that tells you that there's aggressive energy within the body trying to release it. And people also mischaracterize that. And so they're always trying to suppress it. But if that infection is like with your dog, if you don't know your dog's behavior and you see it, then people will use all the cures. Okay, if it's getting in the way of their lifestyle, which is the thing with, I have a careful balance with my dog, is how much of her genetic expression can she handle that it's not completely messing with her and causing her so much suffering, but then how much of the cures am I going to implement without tipping the balance and not allowing the body to release. And so again, you have to understand how it works in your body before you start then figuring out with your animal. And people aren't there yet. They are not there yet. They shouldn't be there yet until they figure out themselves. Because if you can't take care of yourself really in the way that I'm doing it, there's no way you'll be able to understand with your dog or your kid or anyone else or anyone in your charge. But Schrodinger's cat is very interesting. And already I've proven that the chili juice brings up, and salt water brings up predispositions because it wakes up everything that you have suppressed through all the different cures and antibiotics. And so right there, I'm proving genetic expression must be expressed, but it actually wanes over time as the energy is being released. And it can be very aggressive. And it comes out in heart attack, strokes. It comes out in rashes. It comes out in everything that you've suppressed with therapies and with steroids. And either you deal with it and let it express, or you keep curing it and pressing it back into your body, and then you will be cannibalized by all that energy. That's why people pass away, because they do not allow the genes to express themselves. And so I get it's already proved that genetic expression is life. Now, can you die from a lot of life? Well, if you're not feeding, if you're not bringing in all the necessary elements, if you're starving yourself of water, food, and the electrolytes and the sugars and all this stuff, yeah, people die from life because they're not supporting their body correctly. They're starving. They haven't released little demons. They have atrophied their sphincters. They've atrophied this. They have missing tonsils and missing things. They have all this plastic surgery. And everything is painful when they have to actually allow their genes to express. And so, yeah, you could die from genetic expression because if you don't support it with food, water, and electrolytes. And so it's how you respond to the genetic expression is determining whether or not you live indefinitely or you die indefinitely. And so I understand Schrodinger's cat. I get it. It's fucking awesome. Have a good day.